So the New York Mets officially extended the qualifying offer to both Michael Conforto and Noah Syndergaard. But on today's episode of Locked On Mets, we're going to focus just on Noah because there's this perception right now that the Mets may be overpaying for his services next year. And I'm going to explain why that is just not the case at all.
You are Locked On Mets, your daily New York Mets podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello to all you amazing Mets fans. You're listening to Locked On Mets, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Thank you for making Locked On Mets your first listen every day. Locked On Mets is free and available on all platforms, including YouTube. Now, on today's show, we're going to focus on Noah Syndergaard receiving the qualifying offer. It appears like he will accept that qualifying offer, so Thor will be back in Queens next season. In the first segment, what I want to do is talk about this perception, particularly coming out of SNY, that this is a huge overpay for Noah Syndergaard. And I'm going to debunk that and tell you why Noah is getting a pretty fair offer here to come back on this one-year deal. In the second segment, I'll compare Syndergaard's numbers to Kevin Gausman, Robbie Ray, and Marcus Stroman, the three closest comps in this market right now as free agent starting pitchers around his age. Why Syndergaard is a great value on this contract. Then in the last segment, we're going to talk about Zack Wheeler coming off Tommy John surgery. Very similar timetables, 2 years removed with basically no pitching. What did his first season look like? Why is that a cautionary tale for the Mets? But will Syndergaard pitch better than Wheeler? I certainly believe he will. Before we get to any of that, though, I'm your host, Ryan Finkelstein. If you want to find any of my work, follow me on Twitter at FinkelsteinRyan. You can also find some of my writing about the Mets at justbaseball.com. And I actually did write an article about Noah Syndergaard and the fact that he's going to accept this qualifying offer and why this is a good deal for the Mets. And as we are discussing all the layers of this, I just want to open up by saying, isn't it nice when a player wants to play for your ball club and he gets a contract offer? Noah Syndergaard basically openly campaigned for this qualifying offer. When he got back in front of the media, when he did pitch at the end of the season, he said that it would be a blessing to come back to the Mets. He talked about how much he would appreciate the opportunity to get the qualifying offer, how he hoped he would be back in a Mets uniform the next year, and he didn't want to think about pitching for another ball club. Isn't it nice that suddenly the Mets decide to just offer him this qualifying offer? There's no big deliberation. It's not like the Wilpon era of the past where a great Met like a Zack Wheeler will end up on another team because the owner's too cheap. The Mets saw a player that is a gamble, but at $18.4 million on a one-year deal, it's a worthwhile gamble. So they extend him the qualifying offer. Syndergaard likely comes back. I want to get that out there before I get into ripping some of the personalities over at SNY, because they have this perception that they're floating right now that this is a big overpay, that Noah Syndergaard is not worth $18.4 million. And the first one I would talk about is Sal Licata. And Sal Licata, for any of you Mets fans who are familiar, is basically the definition of a New York sports talk radio gas bag. That's his shtick. I get it. He's loud. He's big. He talks with his hands. He's yelling. He makes his points. And this is what has to happen. And he's wrong a lot, which is why you get into him being a gas bag. But here was his take. After this comes out, he tweets saying, "Good sign if you can waste $18 million for a guy who hasn't pitched in 2 years. Can't wait to see the free agent signings this offseason." So basically says that Syndergaard's a waste, that coming off 2 years where he didn't pitch, there's no chance that Noah Syndergaard can contribute next year. They're just throwing this money down the tube. He is the extreme coming out of SNY. Andy Martino, he had a little more of a calculated take. Martino is, of course, a reporter as opposed to just being a gas bag. So I give Martino a little bit more credit. But the comp that he made from Noah Syndergaard was Corey Kluber last offseason, essentially calling it overpay because Corey Kluber got $11 million on a one-year deal from the Yankees after essentially not pitching in 2 years. And he says Kluber had a far better resume. So that would have been Syndergaard's market, is essentially what he's getting at. And really, the point that Martino was trying to make was that this is a good sign that the Mets were willing to just not quibble over a couple of $1,000,000, extend the qualifying offer because they are going to be a luxury tax team. That was really the point that Martino was trying to make. But I think that his comp between Corey Kluber and Noah Syndergaard, it was a lazy one because there's some big differences between what Noah Syndergaard's market would have been and what Kluber's was last offseason. Let's start with the obvious one. Noah Syndergaard's entering his age 29 season. Corey Kluber was entering his age 35 season. Noah Syndergaard coming off Tommy John surgery, which is obviously very common nowadays. The track record is very good that these guys, for the most part, can get back to where they were. Now, it might not be just 2 years after for some pitchers like a Zack Wheeler. It took 3 years removed from the Tommy John surgery to be as good and actually better than he was pre-surgery. But there's certainly a longer track record of pitchers coming off Tommy John surgery than what Kluber was coming off of, which was a torn teres major muscle. Have you ever heard of that before? Because I know I hadn't. I had to do a little more research on what that was. And essentially, that is a muscle that is often confused with the rotator cuff injury, but it's actually below the rotator cuff. It's a muscle in the back, right under the shoulder there. And he felt some shoulder discomfort in his one start with the Texas Rangers in 2020, which was on July 26th. Only pitched an inning and then got shut down because of that muscle tear. So he was going into an age 35 season, 6 months removed from the torn muscle, whereas Noah Syndergaard is entering an offseason healthy, 6 years younger, and had he gone into the market as a free agent without a qualifying offer attached, I find it hard to believe that he's only making $11 million this year. In fact, I think that he's at least getting 15, and quite honestly, he probably could have got within spitting distance of that qualifying offer anyway. There would have been teams lining up to sign a Noah Syndergaard, to get a pitcher who has the upside to be one of the best starting pitchers in baseball. Kluber was that, absolutely. But I don't think anyone had the expectation that in his age 35 season, he was going to be an ace. Now, Syndergaard might not have that same expectation, but there is always that thought when you have a pitcher with his makeup at his age who's still going to be able to throw upwards of 99 to 100 miles an hour, that there would be something there that teams would latch onto and want to invest in. So I could have seen Noah Syndergaard, had he been allowed to test the open market without a qualifying offer attached, I believe he could have got a contract where maybe it's not $18.4 million guaranteed, but it could have been 15 with $5 million in incentives. I don't think that's crazy at all. So I just want to push back on this notion that Noah Syndergaard is overpaid, because if you look at his career numbers, and that's what we're going to do in the next segment, and compare him to Kevin Gausman, to Robbie Ray, to Marcus Stroman, all of these guys, Noah Syndergaard has better career numbers in a lot of categories. And you're talking about free agent starting pitchers that are going to be commanding at least $20 million a year. Marcus Stroman wants 25. You can make an argument that both Gausman and Ray are coming off better seasons than Marcus Stroman. So if he wants 25, why wouldn't they want 25 over 5 or 6 year deals? Noah Syndergaard, 1 year, $18.4 million. Is he anywhere near as much of a sure thing as those guys who are coming off the great seasons, who are healthy? Of course not. But if you compare contracts and which one's more valuable, to me, I look at a 1 year deal for a pitcher, and there really isn't any 1 year deal I'm going to hate. There's really not. For a pitcher this talented, man, that is a contract that could prove to be the steal of the offseason if all things break right. And that's what I want to talk about. In the next segment, we're going to go through the numbers, comparing Syndergaard to these guys and why he could outperform all of them next season. Does this sound familiar? You've got one device that lets you catch the game live, another lets you stream your favorite shows, you're watching your sports highlights on your phone, and you got your neighbor's best friend's login for the other good stuff you're missing? Well, I want to tell you about a simple way to get all that entertainment you love without the hassle, and a great way to finally get your TV together. It's called DirecTV Stream, and it brings your live TV and on-demand favorites together like never before. So you can watch your favorite sports, movies, and shows all in one place. That means no more juggling remotes, no need to buy another device ever again. And the best part, there's no annual contract. So get rid of your clutter and the confusion. Get your TV together with DirecTV Stream. You can learn more at directv.com. That's directv.com. Compatible device required. Content varies by package. One of the things that I can't stand about sports coverage sometimes is there's always just this stark recency bias. It's what have you done for me lately? And if you haven't done anything for me lately, you're worthless. So a Salicata can say that Noah Syndergaard is a complete waste of money because he hasn't seen him pitch on a mound in a couple of years outside of 2 innings at the end of a lost season where, let's be honest, none of us were really watching anymore anyway, right? So we get to this point and we say, all right, Noah Syndergaard, yeah, he used to throw really hard. He was good in 2015 and 2016, but I mean, this guy had an ERA over 4 his last year in 2019. I mean, how good is he really compared to these other starting pitchers? Well, if you look at the career numbers, and obviously for guys like Gossman and Ray, they just came off their best years. They're getting paid off of career years. So, their career numbers as a whole don't reflect the pitchers that they are, at least coming off of this season. But when you're talking about a free agent case, a lot of times teams are looking at what you did throughout your career. They're trying to predict what future performance will be based on the player you've been, right? That's generally the system that's been set up and in place for all these years. Well, let's just look at the numbers here. And we're going Stroman, Gossman, Robbie Ray, Noah Syndergaard. ERA, Marcus Stroman, 3.63 career ERA. Kevin Gossman, 4.02. Robbie Ray, 4.0. Noah Syndergaard, 3.32. By far the best starting pitcher based on career ERA. You go to whip. Marcus Stroman, 1.27. Kevin Gossman, 1.28. Robbie Ray, 1.32. Noah Syndergaard, 1.16. Strikeout per 9. Marcus Stroman, 7.39. Kevin Gossman, 8.88. Noah Syndergaard, 9.74. Robbie Ray did have the edge in this one at 11.21. You get to XFIP. Now, this is expected fielding independent pitching. This is Fangraph's best metric to identify or to encapsulate what a pitcher's ERA should be, essentially. This is the one stat that's supposed to remove all the other factors and just boil down pitcher performance. For their careers, Marcus Stroman, 3.59. Kevin Gossman, 3.82. Robbie Ray, 3.76. Noah Syndergaard, 3.17. So based on ERA, WHIP, and XFIP, Noah Syndergaard has a better career than all these guys. Then you get to WAR. And Noah Syndergaard has not pitched as much as a lot of these guys. Robbie Ray, similar injury history at times. But overall, you look at their career wars, right? Marcus Stroman, 18.2. Kevin Gossman, 19.9. He has been probably the healthiest of the bunch. Robbie Ray, 15.6. Noah Syndergaard, 18.7. And to take things a little bit further when it comes to FWAR, which is obviously wins above. Woo! Let me try that again. Which is obviously wins above replacement by Fangraphs. Robbie Ray and Kevin Gossman are just coming off right now the only seasons in their career where they've had an FWAR over 4. Marcus Stroman has never had an FWAR over 4. Closest he got was 2019 at 3.9. This season, 3.4. Noah Syndergaard, whenever he's made 25 starts in a season, he's eclipsed that number 3 times in his career, in 3 of the last 4 seasons prior to the Tommy John surgery. He has been a great starting pitcher far more consistently than the other guys in this group. And I'm not saying that he is a better bet on a long-term contract. What I'm saying is he's in this same class as these guys who are going to make at least $6 or $7 million more than him for this first year. Plus, you got to pay that over 5 or 6 years where you're giving these guys these salaries, guys like Kevin Gossman and Robbie Ray that don't have the longest track record of being who they were in 2021. So all I'm saying is Noah Syndergaard on a 1-year deal, absolutely worth $18.4 million for the Mets. This is a really smart gamble. And here's the best part about it. You look at 2016. None of these pitchers that we're talking about have had a season as good as Noah Syndergaard was in 2016, where he was second in all of baseball in F WAR behind only Jose Fernandez. Noah Syndergaard had a 6 F WAR season. Fernandez that year was at 6.3. His FIP that year, Noah Syndergaard's, was 2.29, the best mark in baseball. That is fielding independent pitching. His xFIP was a little bit worse than Jose Fernandez, but it was the second best mark in baseball. So he's actually had a season where he's been top 2 when it comes to being the best pitcher in baseball. These other guys were all good. Robbie Ray, Cy Young candidate for sure. I get it. They had good years, but Noah Syndergaard has the potential to dominate and lead a rotation as an ace. I'm not saying he's going to do that, but I'm saying at $18.4 million on a qualifying offer, when the guy said he's going to come back, and if you don't extend him that qualifying offer, who knows where he signs? Who knows if the Phillies or the Braves, if one of those teams might want to poach him? I mean, the Phillies already got Wheeler. Wouldn't they potentially be interested? Noah Syndergaard? The Braves have always had a ton of interest in Noah Syndergaard. So on top of that, you're keeping him away from your division rivals. Who knows if there's another team in the National League that could have wanted Noah Syndergaard? As I said in the first segment, he would have had a really great market had he gone into free agency without the qualifying offer attached. So I look at Noah Syndergaard as a pitcher that could really be an X factor for the 2022 Mets. And if you're going to be a luxury tax team, I mean, this was an absolute no-brainer, especially when you might be entering contract negotiations with Marcus Stroman, where he reportedly won 6 years, 150. I mean, you look at that, you think about what you're paying now for Syndergaard, the fact that you now have more leverage in those talks with Stroman, because if he walks, at least you still have Syndergaard, DeGrom, Carrasco, and Taijuan Walker to start with David Peterson and Tyler McGill potentially factoring into a rotation as well. This puts the Mets in a great position moving forward, and that's what I'm going to talk about in a bit. I want to go through Zack Wheeler's season coming off Tommy John surgery, see how that could be a cautionary tale, but why I believe Syndergaard will be better than that and what the Mets rotation is going to look like with Syndergaard in place. I love Thanksgiving. All the good food and treats, and dessert is always the best part of any feast. But maybe this year, you want a yummy dessert that isn't so chock full of calories and sugar. This is the perfect time for Built Bars. Built Bar is the new holiday dessert. Feast on something delicious and feel good about it. One slice of pie can be upwards of 300 calories, and that's on the low end. Most Built Bars are only 130 calories and only have 4 grams of sugar with plenty of protein. Replace that coconut cream pie with a coconut Built Bar, or go for a raspberry Built Bar instead of that raspberry pie. There's lots of good flavors to replace any pie. They come low in calories, low in carb, low in fat. They are high in protein, and they all come covered in 100% chocolate. Built Bar is a great option for when you're hungry. And if Thanksgiving isn't coming soon enough, go for a Built Bar or 2. There's new surprises all month, limited time flavors arriving at Built.com regularly. So check the site often. There's nothing like a Built Bar Black Friday. So mark your calendar for Black Friday, where there'll be a huge event with all sorts of surprises. Go to Built.com, use the promo code LOCK15, and you'll get 15% off your next order. Again, that's promo code LOCK15 for 15% off at BuiltBar.com. So I know Salicata generally just shoots from the hip, but if I was to be a producer for him and I was going to help him set up his argument, I would say, hey, Sal, look at the 2017 season from Zack Wheeler and hold that up as your example as to why Noah Syndergaard is not worth this qualifying offer and why this is a waste of money. That would be the argument to make. And it's a fair one. It is, because Zack Wheeler was not good in his first season coming off Tommy John, and it was that same timetable. 2 years removed from the surgery. He got it before the 2015 season, did not pitch at all in 2015 or in 2016, comes back in 2017 and was not the same pitcher. He pitched to a 5.21 ERA. But here's the thing. For one, Wheeler dealt with a ton of injuries that year, and I guess that is the cautionary tale, right? That arm still wasn't right. His arm did not get into the place that he's at now until 2018, and then 2018, 2019, 2020, 2021, Zack Wheeler has become one of the best starting pitchers in baseball, and he's been healthy. So obviously health is the first factor in all of this. If Noah Syndergaard's not healthy, it's going to be a bad decision to have given him this contract. But when it comes to the production, to me, I look at Zack Wheeler then and Noah Syndergaard now, and they're at completely different stages of their career. Zack Wheeler in 2017 was still trying to find himself. I mean, really, after the 2014 season, this was still very much a thrower, not necessarily a pitcher. I mean, he still had to learn how to get to that place, and he started to figure it out in the second half of 2014. But for his career up to that point, he was walking close to 4 batters per nine. Noah Syndergaard, far more refined, a 2.1 walk per nine rate for his career at this point. His whip for his career is 1.227, whereas Zack Wheeler at the time was in the mid 1.3. So different pitchers. Wheeler, far more erratic and nowhere near as accomplished as what Noah Syndergaard is now coming back off this injury. Syndergaard, as I said, had 3 seasons in his career so far with WARs over 4. That's not something Zack Wheeler had at that point. So Noah Syndergaard, he knows how to pitch. He has that IQ of a veteran starter at this stage. And he has the stuff. So if he's healthy, I expect good performance. So it just comes to that gamble. Will Noah Syndergaard be healthy? Because I believe if he gives you 25 starts next year, you're going to get another season where there's WARs over 4. And if you get that and Jacob deGrom is healthy, and here's where we get to all of the ifs, the Mets are in great shape. I mean, they have 2 pitchers right now that can be aces. You have Carlos Carrasco, who we've talked about in the past. You can look back at any episode I've done with Carlos Carrasco's name in it where I've defended the guy. If you look at his career numbers, Carlos Carrasco has been a great number 2 starter. In fact, because he was always the number 2, he never got the acclaim that he deserved for technically pitching like an ace for a large portion of his career with the Indians. So now you have those 3 guys, all question marks with injuries. I get it. And Taijuan Walker, who was an all-star in the first half and then had a terrible second half. So right now you're in this weird place where you have a lot of options, but none of them are dependable. And that's where there's still that pull to maybe bring Marcus Stroman back, because he was the one guy this year who took the ball every 5th day, who you could count on to go out there, give you 5 or 6 innings, and keep the other team under 2 runs. Now you go into next season. If he's out of the equation, you're banking on Carrasco to be healthy in his mid-30s. Jacob deGrom, same thing. Noah Syndergaard coming off Tommy John. Taijuan Walker, can he actually be consistent for a full year? David Peterson coming off injuries and a sophomore slump of a season. Tyler McGill certainly looked better in his first 10 to 12 starts than his last. So, yeah, a lot of question marks. But that does not make this a bad decision. Again, a very worthwhile gamble. And now I don't think you have to shop in that top tier when it comes to the starting rotation. I think it'd be certainly great to get a Gossman, a Ray, a Stroman, but I don't think it is a necessity now. I think the most important part for this Mets team currently is to find some depth options, to find this year's Taijuan Walker in free agency, who you can sign for about $10 million, who can be your 5th starter, to go out and find your next Joey Lucchesi that you had this year, whether that's in trade or another signing. Just build out that depth. Because as I said in previous episodes, if you go into next year and David Peterson and Tyler McGill are your 6 and 7 starter on the depth chart, I feel pretty good about this rotation. And the thing is, right now, by bringing Syndergaard back, you're already there. And maybe because Syndergaard's a bigger question mark than having just re-signed Marcus Stroman and letting Syndergaard walk, maybe that means you need to push Peterson and McGill down a peg and have them be your 7 and 8 starters on the depth chart going into this season, and you add 2 more arms. But then again, you have someone like Trevor Williams, if they don't non-tender him, who to me goes right there with Peterson and McGill. So now suddenly, you got Williams who can come out of your bullpen. We saw him do that this year. That's even another depth option. So right now, you're sitting pretty with, a plethora of options before you even get into free agency. And that's why this is such a great signing for the Mets, because it allows you to take the pressure off a bit. It is not as imperative that you bring Marcus Stroman back and potentially overpay to bring Marcus Stroman back. You can let the market play out and find the pitchers that can factor into your rotation, your bullpen that makes sense with the team that you have. But the upside that currently exists with Jacob deGrom, Noah Syndergaard, and Carlos Carrasco as your 1, 2, and 3, if healthy, again, big if, but if healthy, that could be the best 1 through 3 in baseball. And that's why I love this signing, because Noah Syndergaard just presents so much upside. Not to mention, who doesn't love a homegrown Met who wants to remain a Met? And that's where we should close today, because I love the fact that this is a guy who did not just answer the questions the proper letter of the law, media professional way of, we'll see what happens in free agency. I've enjoyed my time with the Mets. I would be interested in coming back, but we never know. No, he in those press conferences made a claim. I want to be a Met. And I'm not at a point where I take something that like that lightly, especially as you're sitting here in the middle of the longest front office search ever where no one wants to be a Met. So get the guy who wants to be a Met, lock him up, they have him for next year, and who knows what happens beyond that. But to me, this is a signing that should be celebrated and should not be criticized as a big overpay, especially when it's not your money. But anyway, that's going to be all for today's edition of Locked On Mets. On tomorrow's show, we'll talk Michael Conforto as he was also extended the qualifying offer, and I'll talk about why he's going to decline it because Scott Boras is currently bandbox shopping for his free agent outfielder. Anyway, thank you for listening. Make sure you follow, rate, and review wherever you get your podcast. Make sure you follow me on Twitter at Finkelstein Ryan. Follow the show at Locked On Mets. Thank you for making Locked On Mets your first listen every day. Now for your second listen, check out Locked On MLB Prospects. Hosted by my guy, RM Layton, Locked On MLB Prospects is the best way to catch up on the stars of tomorrow. You can follow Locked On MLB Prospects wherever you get podcasts.